The lions roar at the orphanage gate. The night wind carried whispers across the savannah, threading through acacia trees and dancing with tall grasses beneath a vast African sky. Stars hung like scattered diamonds above the small orphanage that stood at the edge of the wilderness, a simple building of weathered stone and corrugated metal roofing, its windows glowing with faint lamplight well past midnight. Sister Margaret couldn't sleep. At 63, she had spent more than half her life in this remote corner of Tanzania, caring for children who had no one else. Tonight, something kept her awake, an inexplicable tension in the air, a feeling that had followed her throughout the day like a shadow. She sat at her small desk, reviewing the orphanage's dwindling supplies by the light of a kerosene lamp, when she heard it. A deep, primal roar shattered the night silence. The sound resonated through the orphanage walls, vibrating in her very bones. It wasn't the distant call of a lion marking territory. This was close, perhaps at their very doorstep. Sister Margaret froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. The children! Her thoughts flew to the 23 souls sleeping in the dormitories. Rising quickly, she hurried down the corridor, her worn slippers making soft sounds against the concrete floor. Several of the older children were already sitting up in their beds, eyes wide with fear. "Stay inside," she instructed firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "Everyone remain in your beds." 10-year-old Imani, a girl who had arrived at the orphanage 3 years earlier after losing her parents to illness, spoke in a hushed whisper. "It's the ghost lion, sister. The one the village elders speak of." Sister Margaret offered what she hoped was a reassuring smile. "There are no ghost lions, child, only real ones, and real ones can't open doors. We are safe inside." Another roar came, closer this time, followed by a strange scraping sound against the metal gate. Sister Margaret's colleague, Sister Claire, appeared in the hallway, clutching her rosary. "Should we call for help?" Sister Claire asked, her French accent more pronounced in her fear. Sister Margaret shook her head. "The village is too far, and our radio isn't working. We must wait until morning." Throughout the night, the lion's roars came intermittently, sometimes accompanied by heavy footfalls circling the orphanage perimeter. No one slept. The younger children huddled together, whispering prayers taught to them by the sisters, while the older ones peered anxiously through the cracks in the wooden shutters, hoping to catch a glimpse of the predator that stalked their home. By dawn, the sounds had ceased. Cautiously, Sister Margaret and Brother Thomas, the orphanage's handyman and teacher, ventured outside, armed only with a rusty machete and unwavering faith. What they discovered at the gate left them speechless. There, nestled in a carefully woven basket of reeds and soft grasses, lay a newborn baby boy, his tiny fists clenched against the morning chill. His umbilical cord had been cut recently, perhaps only hours before. Wrapped around him was a blanket of vibrant kanga cloth, its edge torn as if in haste. But it was what surrounded the basket that made Sister Margaret gasp. Clear in the soft earth were the massive paw prints of a lionot circling as if to attack, but leading directly to the gate from the direction of the forest, and then leading away again. "Impossible," Brother Thomas whispered, kneeling to examine the tracks. "A lion would have." He couldn't finish the sentence. They both knew what lions did to vulnerable, helpless creatures, yet here was this infant, untouched. Sister Margaret carefully lifted the basket. The baby stirred but did not cry, opening eyes that seemed too knowing for one so new to the world. "Look," she said softly, pointing to something half buried beside where the basket had rested. It was a lion's tooth, massive and yellowed with age, with a small hole drilled through its base. A thin strand of leather was threaded through it. "A talisman?" Brother Thomas murmured. "From a tribal elder, perhaps." Sister Margaret cradled the basket closer. Someone placed their child in the care of a lion rather than leave him with us directly. Why would they do such a thing? The answer would not come for many years. They named him Jabari, the Brave One, in Swahilian. He grew unlike any child Sister Margaret had ever known. By 3, he could run faster than children twice his age. By 5, he could climb the tallest baobab tree on the orphanage grounds, sending Sister Claire into fits of terrified prayer. By 7, he had a connection with animals that bordered on the miraculous injured birds would allow him to splint their wings, and even the most skittish gazelles wouldn't flee when he approached the orphanage's boundaries. That boy, Sister Margaret often said, has something wild in his soul. It wasn't always easy. Jabari struggled to sit still during lessons, preferring to gaze out the window at the savannah stretching beyond. He asked questions the sisters couldn't answer about his origins, growing increasingly frustrated with each passing year. "Why don't I look like the other children?" he asked one evening, his dark eyes reflecting the setting sun. At 10 years old, his features had begun to reveal his mixed heritage's skin was lighter than his peers. His hair had a different texture, his cheekbones high and pronounced. Sister Margaret sat beside him on the orphanage steps. "God makes each of us unique, Jabari. But where did I come from? Who brought me here?" She touched the lion's tooth that hung around his neck, the same one found that mysterious morning, now strung on a stronger cord. She had given it to him on his 8th birthday, along with the story of how he arrived. "We believe your mother wanted you safe," she said carefully, "and somehow, against all understanding, a lion brought you to us." Jabari fingered the tooth thoughtfully. "The elders in the village say I am marked by the spirits." Sister Margaret sighed. The local villagers had endless theories about Jabari's arrival, some believing he was blessed, others fearing he carried bad fortune. It didn't help that strange coincidences seemed to follow the boy. During the terrible drought 3 years earlier, Jabari had wandered off against strict instructions. Hours later, he led the search party to a hidden spring no one had known existed, saving the orphanage and nearby village from certain disaster. "People fear what they don't understand," she told him gently. "What matters is what you do with the life God has given you." Jabari was silent for a long moment, watching a herd of elephants in the far distance, barely visible through the heat haze. "I think I'm supposed to protect them," he said finally, gesturing toward the animals, "all of them." Sister Margaret felt a chill despite the warm evening air. Something in his voice carried absolute certainty, a purpose too mature for a child of 10. When Jabari turned 16, the dreams began. He would wake in the night, drenched in sweat, with vivid images burned into his mind. A woman with sad eyes and light brown skin running through tall grass, clutching a bundle to her chest. A European man in a hunter's outfit aiming a rifle. A massive male lion charging from the underbrush, blood on dry earth. He confided in Imani, now a beautiful young woman of 26 who had stayed on at the orphanage as a teacher after completing her education through a missionary program. "They feel like memories," he told her one day as they walked along the dusty road to the village market. "But how can I remember something that happened before I was born?" Imani adjusted the basket on her hip thoughtfully. Over the years, she had become like an older sister to Jabari, the one person who didn't treat him as either a miracle or an oddity. "My grandmother believed in ancestral memories," she said, "that the blood carries stories from those who came before us." Jabari kicked at a stone in his path. "I need to know the truth, Imani, about who I am, where I came from." She stopped walking and turned to him, her expression serious. "Be careful what you search for, Jabari. Some truths are painful." He touched the lion's tooth that never left his neck. More painful than not knowing? The answer came unexpectedly when Jabari was 18. a wildlife conservation team arrived at the village to conduct research on the declining lion population in the region. Among them was Dr. Eleanor Richards, a British Kenyan biologist in her 50s who specialized in big cat behavior. She visited the orphanage to speak to the children about conservation efforts, showing photographs of lions fitted with tracking collars and explaining the threats they faced from poaching and habitat loss. Jabari sat in the back of the room, transfixed by every word. After the presentation, while the other children crowded around to see Dr. Richards' equipment, Jabari approached her quietly. "The lions that vanished from this region 12 years ago," he said without introduction, "could they have been killed by poachers?" Dr. Richards studied him curiously. "Interesting that you mention that specific time frame. There was indeed a devastating period of poaching then. An entire pride was wiped out except for one female that disappeared. How did you know?" Before Jabari could respond, Sister Margaret joined them, introducing Jabari and explaining the unusual circumstances of his arrival at the orphanage. Dr. Richards' face paled as she listened. When Sister Margaret mentioned the date, the scientist's hand went to her mouth. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the lion's tooth around Jabari's neck. With hesitation, Jabari removed it and placed it in her palm. Dr. Richards examined it carefully, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather notebook. She flipped through pages of handwritten notes until she found what she was looking for, a photograph. "This was Raja," she said, showing them the image of a magnificent male lion with a distinctive dark mane. "He was the alpha of the pride that was killed by poachers. Notice anything unusual about his teeth?" The photograph showed the lion yawning, revealing that one of his upper canines was missing. Sister Margaret gasped softly. Could it be? Dr. Richards measured the tooth with a small caliper from her pocket. "I would need to run tests to be certain, but the size and shape match Raja's missing canine." Jabari stared at the photograph, a strange recognition stirring within him. What happened to him? Dr. Richards closed her notebook slowly. "Raja was known for unusual behavior. He once guided our research team to an injured cub trapped in a poacher's snare. The local Maasai believed he carried the spirit of a great warrior." She paused. "He was killed defending his pride against poachers, but his Matea lioness named Zuri escaped. She was pregnant and never found." "And the poachers?" Sister Margaret asked. "There was one who survived that night. The others were found dead, apparently mauled by Raja, before he succumbed to his wounds." Dr. Richards hesitated. "The survivor was a mixed-race man, half European, half local. He abandoned poaching after that night and became something of a recluse. He lives on the other side of the national park." Jabari's heart pounded in his chest. "What's his name?" "Nikolai Jensen." "But Jabari, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, I need to speak with him." It took weeks of convincing before Sister Margaret would allow Jabari to accompany Dr. Richards to find Jensen. She insisted on coming along, unwilling to let Jabari face this journey alone. They found Jensen living in a small compound at the edge of the protected Lansa man in his 50s with weathered skin and haunted eyes. When Dr. Richards introduced Jabari and explained their purpose, the man seemed to physically shrink, as if the weight of long-carried guilt suddenly became too heavy. "I've been waiting," he said simply, inviting them into his modest home decorated with local artwork and crowded with books on wildlife conservation. "I knew someday you would come." Inside, over cups of strong tea, Jensen revealed the story that had burdened him for 18 years. "I was not always the man you see now," he began, his accent revealing his Danish heritage. "I came to Africa believing I could make easy money selling animal parts to collectors. I told myself they were just animals." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "That night, we tracked the pride that the locals called the Guardians. Their alpha male, Raja, had tusks that a collector in Hong Kong wanted desperately. But there was a woman, Nia, a local conservationist who had been tracking our movements. She tried to stop us. His eyes shifted to Jabari. She was your mother. Jabari felt the world tilt beneath him. Sister Margaret reached for his hand, but he pulled away, needing to stand on his own for this truth. "What happened to her?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jensen closed his eyes briefly. She confronted us with nothing but her courage and a camera to document our crimes. She was pregnant, very pregnant. My partners threatened her, but she wouldn't back down. Then the lions came, as if she had called them. He shook his head in disbelief, even after all these years. "Raja attacked my partners while the lioness zurled your mother away. I was injured, but managed to escape." "And my mother?" Jabari pressed. "I followed the blood trail at dawn. I found Raja dead from gunshot wounds, my partners mauled, but no sign of your mother or the lioness." Jensen rose slowly and went to an old trunk in the corner. From it, he withdrew a weathered leather satchel. Until 3 days later, when I heard about a baby delivered to the orphanage after lion roars were heard. I knew then what had happened. He handed the satchel to Jabari. These were hers. I found them near where she disappeared. With trembling hands, Jabari opened the bag. Inside was a journal filled with wildlife observations, photographs of lions, particularly Raja and Zurian, personal reflections. There was also a small wooden box containing a silver bracelet with a single charm, a lion. Her name was Nia Mutua. She was completing her doctoral research on lion behavior and communication. Brilliant woman, kind. Jensen's voice broke. After that night, I dedicated my life to protecting what she loved. It doesn't make up for what I did, but... Jabari looked up from a photograph of his mother, a beautiful woman with a determined smile, her hand resting on her pregnant belly as she stood at the edge of the savannah. "You think the lioness Zuri brought me to the orphanage?" Jensen nodded slowly. Lions are not known to carry things gently in their mouths like a house cat, but a lioness carrying her cub, that they can do with extraordinary gentleness. Dr. Richards, who had been listening silently, spoke up. "There have been documented cases of lionesses adopting orphaned animal 7 baby antelopes that would normally be prey. It's rare, but not impossible." Sister Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. A miracle is what it was. God works through his creatures in ways we cannot fathom. Jabari felt something settle in his soul, a puzzle piece long missing. "My mother died that night, didn't she?" Jensen nodded sadly. "I believe so. She was wounded and in labor. I searched for weeks but found no trace except a torn piece of her kanga cloth near a river crossing." "And my father?" She never spoke of him. In her journal, she mentions only that he was from her village, but had gone to study in Europe. She was planning to raise you alone. Jabari closed the journal, running his fingers over his mother's handwriting. She saved the lions, and in return, they saved her son. The knowledge transformed Jabari. He spent months reading his mother's journal, learning about her passion for wildlife conservation and her special connection with Raja and Zuri's pride. The dreams continued, but now they felt like a gift, fragments of his mother's experiences passing to him. When he turned 20, Jabari made his decision. "I'm going to university to study wildlife conservation," he announced to Sister Margaret. "I want to continue my mother's work." Sister Margaret embraced him, her eyes shining with pride and sorrow at his impending departure. "She would be so proud of you." Dr. Richards helped secure a scholarship for Jabari at the University of Nairobi. Before he left the orphanage that had been his only home, Jabari made a pilgrimage to the place where his mother had disappeared, a secluded valley that Jensen had marked on a map. There, beneath the spreading branches of an ancient baobab tree, Jabari buried a small tokenon of his baby shoes that Sister Margaret had kept. It was his way of connecting with the mother he never knew and the land that had given him life. As he knelt on the sun-warmed earth, he heard a sound that made him freeze, the deep rumble of a lion's growl. Slowly turning, he found himself facing a lioness, standing just 20 feet away, her amber eyes fixed on him with intelligence that seemed beyond animal understanding. Time suspended as they regarded each other. The lioness was older muzzle graying, her body bearing the scars of a long life in the wild. Around her neck was a faint mark, the remnant of a tracking collar long since fallen away. "Zuri?" Jabari whispered, hardly daring to believe. The lioness blinked slowly, a gesture known among cats as one of trust. Then, as silently as she had appeared, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the golden grass. Jabari remained kneeling, tears streaming freely down his face. Whether the encounter was chance or something more mystical, he couldn't say. But in that moment, he felt the completion of a circle that had begun 18 years before, on a night when a lion's roar shattered the silence outside an orphanage gate. 10 years later, Dr. Jabari Mutua stood before an international conservation conference in Nairobi, his passionate speech moving even the most hardened politicians. The lions of Africa are not merely animals to be viewed on safaris or hunted as trophies, he told the assembled delegates. They are the heartbeat of this continent, and their disappearance would leave a wound in our collective soul that can never heal. His conservation program had already restored 3 prides to areas where lions had been extinct for decades. His methods were revolutionary, combining modern science with traditional knowledge and a deep respect for the complex social structures of lion communities. In the audience sat an aging Sister Margaret, her face radiant with pride. Beside her was Imani, now Jabari's wife and partner in conservation work, cradling their infant daughter. After the standing ovation, a journalist approached Jabari. "Your work has been described as almost supernatural in its effectiveness. Some say you can communicate with the lions in ways other researchers cannot. What's your secret?" Jabari touched the lion's tooth that still hung around his neck. "There is no secret, only compassion. When we recognize that every living creature has value beyond its usefulness to humans, when we approach nature with humility instead of domination, we begin to hear what it has been telling us all along." Later that evening, as the African sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Jabari stood on the hotel balcony with his daughter in his arms. In the distance, the silhouette of a lioness appeared on a ridge, her form outlined against the setting sun. "Look, Nia," he whispered to his daughter, named for the grandmother she would never meet. "That's part of your heritage. The courage of a mother who gave everything for what she believed in. The compassion of a lioness who carried a human child to safety. The dedication of a woman who raised a boy not her own." He turned to see Sister Margaret joining them on the balcony, her steps slower now, but her spirit undimmed. "And the love of those who choose to be family," she added softly, placing her hand on Jabari's shoulder. As darkness fell across the savannah, the distant roar of a lion carried on the evening breeze a sound of both power and vulnerability, a reminder of what could be lost and what might yet be saved through courage, compassion, and the connections that transcend the boundaries between species. In that moment, Jabari realized that the true lesson of his extraordinary life was not that humans must save nature, but that we are inseparable from it, that in saving the lions, the elephants, the forests and rivers, we save ourselves, and that sometimes the greatest acts of compassion come from the most unexpected sources, teaching us that love knows no boundaries, not even between species. The lion's roar that had once heralded his arrival at an orphanage gate now called him forward into a future where humans and wildlife might yet find a way to share this planet with mutual respect and Korea future his mother had glimpsed and for which she had given her life. It was a legacy worth protecting, one roar at a time.